There is no map, no compass, no engine, no rescue, and possibly no land in sight. Behind you is the last shore you know. In front of you is open water, not a river, not a lake, the ocean. You have children, tools, food, water, and a boat made from materials archaeology may never find. If the wind changes, you may never come back. If the water runs out, no one is coming. If you guessed wrong, the horizon stays empty. And still, sometime tens of thousands of years ago, humans crossed the sea into Sahul, the ancient landmass that included Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and nearby islands when sea levels were lower. They did not just walk there. Even during the Ice Age, when coastlines were different and sea levels were much lower, there was still water in the way. Real ocean, real crossings, real risk. So the question is not just, how did ancient humans reach Australia? The question is, why would anyone push away from shore when they could not be sure what waited on the other side? For a long time, people imagined the first journey to Australia as almost simple. Sea levels were lower, land was exposed, humans followed the coast. Eventually, they arrived. But that version misses the most important part. Lower sea levels helped. They connected huge areas that are underwater today. Southeast Asia had a larger landmass called Sunda. Australia and New Guinea were part of a larger landmass called Sahul. But between Sunda and Sahul was Wallacea, a broken world of islands, deep channels, currents, and open water. A place where land appeared, disappeared, and appeared again, but never became one complete bridge. That means at some point, ancient humans reached the edge of the known land, and the next step was not walking, it was water. And that changes everything, because walking into a new valley is dangerous. Walking into a new forest is dangerous, but pushing a small watercraft into the ocean is a different kind of decision. On land, you can stop. You can turn around, you can follow footprints back. On the ocean, once the shore disappears behind you, the world becomes very simple. Water below, sky above, horizon everywhere, and a tiny group of humans trying very hard not to become a sad mystery. Now, the exact timing of the first arrival is still debated, but one of the most important archaeological sites is Majid Bebe in northern Australia. It suggests humans were there by around 65,000 years ago, and the people at Majid Bebe were not helpless castaways who had stumbled onto a beach and started panicking creatively. The site includes stone tools, grinding stones, pigments, and ground-edge axe technology. In other words, when humans arrived, they were already carrying a world of knowledge. Tools, food processing, materials, planning, culture. They were not arriving empty. But that makes the ocean problem even more interesting. Because if these people reached Sahul, they needed some form of watercraft. And that is where archaeology becomes frustrating. The boat is missing, of course it is. If it was made from wood, bamboo, bark, plant fiber, or tied materials, it probably rotted away tens of thousands of years ago. The ocean crossing survived in the evidence. The boat did not, which means we cannot honestly say they used this exact type of boat. We do not know. Maybe it was a bamboo raft, maybe lashed logs, maybe a simple canoe-like craft, maybe different groups used different designs. But we can say this. Something carried people across the water. Something carried supplies. Something survived. Waves, current, wind, and time long enough to reach land. The boat is missing, but the crossing is not. And this is where the story gets stranger, because if one small group had accidentally drifted across the ocean, that might explain one arrival. Maybe a storm, a broken raft, a desperate fishing trip gone very wrong. The world's worst surprise vacation. But one accidental arrival does not explain a successful population. If only a few people washed ashore, exhausted and half dead, that is a story, not a settlement. To create a lasting population, people had to arrive in enough numbers, with women, men, children, skills, tools, knowledge, and probably repeated contact or repeated arrivals. One boat can make a legend. Repeated voyages make history. Models of the first peopling of Sahul suggest that successful settlement was unlikely to come from one tiny accident. Some research estimates that a founding population may have needed to be over 1,000 people, or built up through multiple voyages over many generations. That does not mean 1,000 people all sat in one gigantic Stone Age cruise ship. Please imagine the customer reviews. Too much ocean, 1 star. It means the crossing probably had to work more than once. Again and again, across years, maybe centuries, different groups, different attempts, different routes, some successful, some maybe not. And that raises the most haunting question in the whole video. How did they know where to go? Because the title says no map, and that is true in the modern sense. No paper map, no compass, no GPS, no satellite view, no weather app saying, light chance of death, ocean crossing not recommended. But humans do not need a modern map to have knowledge. A map can be in memory, in stories, in repeated journeys, in the shape of coastlines, in birds, clouds, currents, winds, stars, the color of water, the direction of swell, the smell of land after rain, the behavior of animals, and in something even more powerful. Someone saying, "My father went that way," or "From the high ground, land was seen there," or "When the wind changes in this season, you can cross." For some possible routes, islands may have been visible from the coast or from nearby high ground. That matters. If you can see land, the journey is still terrifying, but at least the horizon has a target. But other possible crossings were worse. For parts of the southern route, researchers have argued that the destination was not visible from the coast. That means at least some crossings may have required something much more frightening, leaving the beach for a place you could not see. Not crossing to that island, but crossing because knowledge, signs, memory, or belief told you land should be there. Imagine standing on the shore, the sea is moving, the boat is ready, people are watching, someone has tied supplies down, someone is holding a child, someone is pretending not to be scared, which is a very ancient human tradition. And ahead of you is nothing. No land, no proof, just the possibility of another world. Why go? That is the part we cannot fully know. Maybe people were following resources, fish, shellfish, birds, stone, wood, plants, fresh water. Maybe groups were growing and splitting. Maybe social conflict pushed some people away. Maybe curiosity mattered. Maybe short crossings came first, then longer ones. Maybe each island made the next one seem possible. Humans probably did not wake up one morning and say, "Let's discover Australia." They may not have known a continent was waiting. They were moving through a world of islands, step by step, shore by shore, risk by risk. And at some point, that island world demanded a choice. Stop here or cross again. This is what makes the first journey to Sahul so powerful. It was not just bravery. Bravery alone gets you killed very efficiently. This was logistics. A voyage across open water needs planning. Water, food, tools, a way to paddle or steer, a way to keep supplies dry, a way to keep children alive, a way to repair the craft if something breaks, a way to choose the right season, a way to read wind and current, a way to decide that today is the day. Because a crossing of days is not just get in boat, arrive at plot twist. It is hour after hour of exposure. Sun, salt, thirst, fear, boredom, more fear. Someone asking, "Are we there yet?" 50,000 years before cars made that sentence famous. And worst of all, uncertainty. On land, if you're hungry, you might search. On water, you eat what you brought. On land, if you are thirsty, you might look for a stream. On water, you drink what you carried. On land, if the weather changes, you might find shelter. On water, the weather becomes your shelter, which is to say, bad shelter. So what did they bring? We do not know the exact packing list. No ancient luggage tag survived saying, "Property of the first Australians, please return to Wallacea." But they would have needed water, food, stone tools, cutting edges, maybe cordage, maybe fire-making knowledge or transported embers, materials for repairs, and most importantly, people who knew what to do when something went wrong. Because a boat is not only an object, it is a skill system. Someone has to build it, someone has to launch it, someone has to read the water, someone has to keep the group calm, someone has to know when to wait, someone has to know when waiting is more dangerous than leaving. And this is where ancient humans become much more impressive than the cartoon version of cavemen. They were not stupid people with simple tools. They were people solving hard problems with perishable materials. The tools that survived are stone, but the journey probably depended on things that vanished: wood, fiber, bark, bamboo, rope, knowledge, practice, and memory. The most important technology may have left no fossil at all. A knot, a paddle stroke, a story about a current, a warning about the wrong season, a child watching an adult shape a raft, a group remembering which horizon once brought someone back. And then came the crossing. Maybe the first successful groups moved along a northern route. Maybe others came by a southern route. The exact path is still debated. But every serious possibility has one thing in common. Water had to be crossed, and not just once. The journey to Sahul was probably a chain of decisions, a chain of islands, a chain of risks. Each crossing made the next one possible. Each success turned the unknown into knowledge. That is how humans move into impossible places, not by knowing everything at the beginning, but by turning one dangerous step into remembered experience. The first time, the ocean is mystery. The second time, it is still dangerous. But now someone knows the wind. Someone remembers the shape of the clouds. Someone knows how long the water lasted. Someone knows what broke on the craft. Someone knows where land appeared. The unknown becomes a route, and a route becomes culture. That may be the real answer to the title. How did ancient humans cross the ocean with no map? They may not have had maps on skin, bark, or stone, but they had maps in people, in memory, in observation, in repeated journeys, in the signs of the sea, and in the terrifying human habit of asking, what is beyond that? But reaching Sahul was only half the story, because arrival is not the ending. It is the beginning of a new problem. Imagine surviving the ocean and stepping onto a continent where almost everything is unfamiliar. New plants, new animals, new seasons, new dangers, new coastlines, new foods that might be useful, poisonous, difficult, or all three depending on how confidently Kevin prepares dinner. Again, Kevin. But the early evidence from Majid Bebe suggests these people adapted quickly. They used plant foods. Some required processing. They made and used grinding stones. They worked pigments. They produced tools. They were not simply surviving a beach. They were learning a continent. That is the part that makes this journey enormous. It was not only a crossing of water, it was a crossing from one known world into a new one. And it worked. Humans spread across Sahul, across coastlines, across forests, across dry lands, across rivers, across places that would later become Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and drowned landscapes now hidden under the sea. The first people who reached Sahul became part of one of the longest continuous human stories on Earth, and all of it required someone at some point to look at open water and go. No compass, no engine, no rescue, maybe no land in sight, just a small craft, a group of people, supplies that had to last, knowledge that could not fail, and a horizon that offered no guarantee. Modern people often imagine ancient humans as cautious, simple, trapped by nature. But this journey tells a different story. Ancient humans were not just surviving the world, they were testing its edges. They reached the last shore they knew and asked what came after it. And maybe that is one of the most human moments in all of prehistory. Not the moment someone found land, but the moment before. When the shore was still behind them, the ocean was still ahead, the map did not exist, and they went anyway.